Hi, and welcome back to the Faculty of Health Sciences Success Programme, Module 2, Academic Reading and Critical Thinking. Why is reading critical in academic writing? Well, we need to be able to link theory to academic and professional practice and application. We need to provide foundations for evidence-based learning, writing and practice, professional practice. Our reading enhances our comprehension, our analysis, and ultimately our writing. And what does academic reading need? We have to read with purpose, so we know what we're reading for and about, and with a critical focus. We need to be able to distinguish between information gathering and collecting and knowledge building. And our role and our responsibility is to integrate and synthesize information from multiple sources and viewpoints. So what sources does academic reading use? First of all, we read peer-reviewed journals and academic books and texts. We often refer to government and health organization reports, but we avoid unverified online sources, for example, blogs and certainly AI summaries. And what does academic reading involve? We need then to make sure that those citations and publications are appropriate and valid and current. We have to check the author's credentials and the quality of the publication that we are reading. We also, through our critical lens, need to be able to identify any bias, scope, or criticality. So, before we write our first draft, it's our responsibility to locate appropriate source articles and information, read the articles strategically, make notes that will support us when we're preparing to write our first draft. We need to be able to summarize and paraphrase the information that we find. So how do we determine whether the information that we're bringing in is credible? Well, first of all, who's publishing the article? Is it a government agency? Is it a commercial company? Is it a recognized academic publisher? Is it a personal web page? And what authority does the writer have on the subject? We need to investigate. Now, the article itself, what intent does it have? Are they trying to actually sell something, a product or a service? Are they focused on one particular viewpoint? Can we identify bias or conflict? And ultimately, has it been peer reviewed? And we can go as far as to check in the journal who the peer reviewers are. Now, is the information that's provided current? Is the publication recent? Is there a copyright or last update date for the website? Very important to make sure it is as current as possible and appropriate. Is supporting evidence provided? Are there references through the text of the information that's included to support the claims that are made? So what reading strategies are appropriate? Obviously, we have to be selective. We've just discussed this. We can skim read the sources to select the most relevant. We can use titles, headings. Now, the abstract is very important, as is the introduction and conclusion. But certainly those first three invariably will tell us whether this article is appropriate for our needs. Now, once we've identified relevant sources, we can then read more deeply and efficiently. And as we read through, we can start making notes. And those notes should be annotations, summarizing, paraphrasing, even quoting, although we have to be careful with quoting. We don't need or want too many quotes. We need to have the page numbers where it comes from and where everything is sourced. We've got to be very careful about that, particularly when we are citing and referencing. Our job is to evaluate the information that we're engaging with. And that evaluation includes a comparison and contrast the information. So one paper may discuss one element, another paper may discuss the same element, but in a different way. And we need to be able to compare and contrast that information. And that also encourages us to look for patterns and themes, both similarities and differences. And it's our job to seek out convergences, what information supports other information, and also divergences. Our role, and in our note-taking, we need to summarize and reflect in relation to what we're writing about, and that we've understood everything's there. Now, that may be supported through creating a mind map or outlines, certainly note-taking, even discussion. So how do we find those sources? Well, we know that PubMed and Scopus, ProQuest are available through the library. And if we want to learn how to use them, the library does provide programs and courses and learning around each of these, so you can investigate that. We also have Google Scholar. Now, Google Scholar does have its limitations, and we do have to be careful. But there are some advantages. And we can always make sure that we scrutinize the paper or the journal that is presented in Google Scholar. So here is an image of Google Scholar and what it's offered. Now, I'm looking at peer mentoring for refugee and migrant women. This is my assignment is focused on this, and we can see that it's come up with a relevant journal article. However, I do recommend using Scopus or the other databases that are on offer. Is always actually the best option, and you can certainly rely on them to provide valid and authentic texts. As I said, ask the library to show you how to use them. Now, one way to make sure that the journal is appropriate is its ranking. So quartile ranking provides 4 levels of publication. So Q1 has the top 25% of citations, and through to Q4 is the bottom 25% of citations. So you would know that if it was a Q1 or Q2 journal, it is very well recognized in the area. That doesn't mean that a Q4 is not appropriate. Now, in some cases, the Q4, the reasoning behind its Q4 is it has a very limited area of reading. So it may be limited to one country or one region. So it really depends on what you are writing about, what you are researching, as to whether this would be appropriate or not. Now, what we do have to be careful with is what's called predatory journals. Now, as an academic, on a very regular basis, I get this kind of email. Medical Sciences. This is the Medical Sciences Journal. And it provides me with information about the journal, and it's encouraging me to present a paper to the journal. But if I look more closely, if I investigate more closely on this journal, I discover that it's not recognized. And in fact, it's set up very much to make money. So a predatory journal is publishing as much as it can really to make money. And we can't rely on what it provides. So be very careful. Now, you can, in fact, do a search on a journal. Ask, is this a predatory journal? And Google, whatever, will tell you. Right, so we have a journal. We're reading through carefully, and we have to start making notes. As we make our notes, we must keep focused on the task. It can be very easy to go off on a tangent. You must always stick to what you're looking for and focus, keep that focus. Now, as we develop our understanding by reading through multiple journals, obviously we're gathering more evidence, and that evidence needs to be noted, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on. And then we also have to think about how we're going to order the information in our assignment. Now, it's very important to think to yourself that one paragraph will represent one topic. And so we can plan our writing by paragraphs or paragraph topics. So as we are making our notes, we should try to identify that topic that can be used in the paragraph. And here we have a note-taking template that is available in the Academic and Professional Literacies site. Now, as you can see, the template requires you to add the author or authors, the date of the publication, the title of the article and where it comes from in terms of the journal or book. And you can see that we have the column on the left-hand side that focuses on the topics. Now, for each of those topics, We can provide our own paraphrase or a summary, or in some cases, a quote. And this also helps us to consider, as we've already discussed, that the paragraph will be a topic based, so this will help us to create the appropriate paragraphs. And here's an example of our note-taking template in use. So we have the authors, Bork et al. This paper is 2023, exploring the barriers and enablers of diabetes care in remote Australian context. And that's where the journal is. That's what the journal is. Okay, and we have our topics in the left-hand column, the first one being barriers. And our notes around those barriers. What are the problems associated with healthcare for type 2 diabetes? And our notes from this journal suggest there are 4 main barriers. As we can see, community effects, family, access to health provision, and communication and maintenance in remote areas. Next are the enablers. What can help healthcare for type 2 diabetes? So that's what our note-taking template can function as, and particularly that focus on the topics that we will bring into our assignment. Now, what we need to consider is us as critical thinkers. So are you a critical thinker? Critical thinkers do not accept what we're told or what we read. We question everything. And how does a critical thinker act? Well, we do not accept what we read or hear at face value. We need to find out more. We look for evidence and reasoning before accepting anything, a hypothesis, a theory, or a statement. We dig deeper. And critical thinking is at the heart of what it means to be both a professional and academic in any field. And at the moment at university, you are both professional and academic focused. So let's put on our critical lens, or lenses. Critical thinkers seek to see things through multiple lenses or multiple perspectives. And the information that we need, for example, and we've discussed this already, who wrote it? Who wrote this article? What's their background? Their academic background, professional background, even in some cases political background. Who are they writing this article for? Who's the intended audience? Is it a general article for anybody to engage with, or is there a focused audience? Are they trying to give a specific message? What's the political, environmental, economic, cultural context of this research or of this paper? And is funding involved in any way? And if there is, who's funding them? In terms of critical questioning, there are 3 levels of questioning. There is the description, the analysis, and the evaluation. So in a way, we're either digging deeper or climbing higher. Now, in terms of description, the questions that we are asking: who, what, where, when, what is the situation, what's the main point, what's the context, is there a problem, where did this actually take place, what's the setting, who's involved, who's affected, who actually started this, and who's interested. Who is the focus of interest and who is interested? Who does it involve? And of course, it's very important to think about when it happened. Now we can go to the next level of analysis. So questions like, well, how does it work? Does it work only in theory or theory and practice? And what evidence is there around the practice, the theory in practice? Is there one particular factor that affects another? And does one limiting factor affect everything? The question why? Why did it happen? Why was it done? Why this particular argument or strategy or focus and not a different one? And what if this was actually wrong? Are there alternatives? What happens if there was actually a problem with this response? Is there a factor or variable that needs to be removed or should be removed or has been removed? And then the next level of evaluation. Now this aligns very much to our assignment writing. We need these levels in our assignment writing as well. So it's very important to consider this critical approach aligns very much with the writing of our assignments. So what? What does it actually mean? What's the significance? Are there implications and what are they? Is it successful? And if it is, why? And if it wasn't, why? Does the response and the information meet all the criteria that we are focused on? And then, what next? Is this concept idea transferable or generalizable? Can it be put into other settings? Will it function in other settings? If so, why? And if not, why not? How and where else can it be applied? And overall, what can we learn from this and what needs to happen into the future? Well, there's lots to think about here. Where to find the right information, making sure it's reliable and valid, making notes in preparation for writing or creating the assignment, and everything achieved through that critical lens. Okay, let's see you in Module 3. Bye.